Africa is transforming, in what way and how?
Yes, well, I think if you look back 10, 20, 30 years politically and in terms of governance, government structures, government initiatives, and simply the growth rates of many countries and the development trajectory of many countries. And I think overall, overwhelming, if you think of Africa as more than 50 countries, we're seeing a significant change. And I think in South Africa we're closer to it, we're obviously aware of it, but I think worldwide, and myself living in China and in Asia, I'm starting to hear very different questions being asked about Africa, and I think the awareness suggests to me that Africa is seen as rising in importance, and for different reasons. We're seeing Africa as an important market when I speak to people in Asia Pacific for goods and for services, whether it be low-cost country sources of products or services in, say, a country like China, or whether it be in Singapore, and a relatively advanced economy with high-tech ideas, high-tech people, high-tech products and services. So across the spectrum, I think the large market that is Africa is seen as transforming and moving ahead over the medium and long term as an opportunity. At the same time, there's competition for resources, and Africa is a very important resource region, but it still needs to unlock that full potential, and that goes hand in hand with infrastructure development, which itself presents an opportunity for players in the West, players in South Africa, and also the rest of the world, in particular Asia. Also Australia, where we're seeing very significant investment in the mining industry and all the service providers to the Australian mining industry going after their traditional clients into the African market. So we're really seeing the West, with strong roots and history in Africa, trying to cling to its positions of having influence here. But we're seeing new emerging giants in the form of China, India, Russia to an extent, the Middle East, and also other key players like Japan coming back, to reassert itself. And also, as I say, countries like Australia, smaller players like Singapore. So I think for South Africa, it's important that we understand that the competitive field in Africa is going to become a little bit more challenging and demanding, and that given our advantages of being on the continent, having a specific positioning, must be leveraged fully to tap into this transforming Africa. I think China is a very different country from 20 years ago, and so is Africa. I think there's been a lot of change, and I think all of it working towards more globalization, first of all, as a backdrop factor. But as I've just said, Africa is looking very different and is a much more positive story. It's also a very important resource environment for a developing country like China. And remember, 20 years ago, China was in effect a net exporter of raw materials, whereas since the early and mid-1990s, it's become a net importer. But more broadly than that, all countries, and also China, look at various reasons in terms of motivation for their global interactions and international relations. And I think in Africa, China sees it as an important diplomatic arena, for example, in the United Nations, to get as much support and alliances in the region with more than 50 countries. But it's also seen as a very important export market for technology, for services, for products. And so therefore I think it becomes almost a comprehensive engagement for China, because of the view that it takes, favorable view that it takes of Africa over the medium and long term.